I stopped by the security desk on my way out and asked Marcus, straight out, if he'd seen anybody drop off an umbrella at the loading dock lately. He gave me a look like I'd asked him something in another language. "Nobody comes through that door but staff," he said. "Cameras would have caught it." That should have been the end of it. Instead, it made everything worse, because now I had proof that whoever kept leaving a dry umbrella by the employee entrance every time it rained wasn't a stranger wandering in off the street. It was someone who worked here, someone who knew my shifts. I'm a respiratory therapist, 3rd floor, mostly the ICU step-down unit, mostly nights. It's not glamorous work. Nobody writes movies about the person adjusting ventilator settings at 3 in the morning while a patient's family sleeps in plastic chairs down the hall. I don't mind the invisibility of it most days, but that fall, somebody had clearly been paying enough attention to notice that I walked out that specific door, on rainy nights specifically, without an umbrella. Specifically because I always forgot to check the forecast before my shift. The first time, I figured a patient's family member left it and forgot. I turned it in to Lost and Found. 2 days later, another rainstorm, another umbrella, propped against the same brick wall like it grew there. I stopped turning them in after the 3rd one. By the 6th, I had a small collection in my hallway closet. Black, navy, one a slightly embarrassing shade of teal, and a running joke with myself that I'd married into an umbrella inheritance I never asked for. My friend Priya, who works triage downstairs, thought it was romantic. I thought it was mildly unsettling, in the way anything anonymous is unsettling, even when it's kind. Kindness with no name attached makes you suspicious of your own gratitude. Am I the only one who feels that way? Something good happens, and instead of just accepting it, you turn it over looking for the catch. I started watching the security camera feed in the break room when I had a spare minute, half convinced I'd catch a nurse from another floor, or maybe one of the maintenance guys who was always too shy to say more than good morning. I never caught anyone. Whoever it was knew exactly where the blind spot in the coverage sat, which told me something else. This wasn't random generosity. This was planned, studied. It was October, the rain coming down sideways, when I decided I was done being a good sport about it. I clocked out at 11:40, stepped through the employee door, and there was the umbrella, same spot, and next to it, this time, a person. He was leaning against the brick with his own umbrella already up, badge clipped to his scrub top, soaped through at the shoulders, like he'd been standing there a while, deciding whether to stay or bolt. I recognized him vaguely, cardiology fellow, the kind of face you see in hallway crowds and forget to attach a name to because you're always moving in opposite directions. "You're late tonight," he said, which was such a strange thing to say to a stranger that I actually laughed. "Excuse me? You usually leave around 11:15. I was starting to think something happened." He winced right after he said it, like he heard himself for the first time. That sounded worse out loud than it did in my head. "You've been timing my shifts?" "Not on purpose. I mean, yes, on purpose, but not in a..." He exhaled, dragged a hand through wet hair. "I'm making this so much worse. I'm Daniel. I round on the cardiac patients you're managing on vents sometimes. 4 months ago, you caught a settings issue on Mr. Ferraro before I did, and I never told you that saved him a much worse night. I meant to say thank you, and I just never, the words came out as an umbrella instead." I stood there letting the rain needle sideways past the awning, trying to decide if I was flattered or annoyed, and landing, unhelpfully, on both. 6 umbrellas, 6 chances to just say a sentence to my face, and instead I get hardware. "You could have just told me at the nurse's station," I said. "Words are free, umbrellas cost money." I know how that sounds now. At the time it felt easier. He looked at me properly for the first time, not sideways, not apologizing. "I've started conversations with attendings twice my age about a patient crashing, and I didn't feel half this nervous." That admission did something to the annoyance in my chest, softened it at the edges without erasing it entirely. There's a version of this where the anonymity reads as sweet, devoted, a slow burn gesture repeated until it earns its reveal. There's another version where it reads as a man too uncomfortable with directness to just ask a coworker to coffee, letting a woman wonder for 2 months who was leaving things at her door. I wasn't sure which version I was standing in. Maybe both were true at once, which is usually how people actually are. "Why tonight?" I asked. "Why show up now?" "Because my sister told me if I let one more rainy shift go by without saying something, she was going to march down here herself and do it for me." He almost smiled. "And because I heard you telling Priya at the vending machines that you were going to start checking the cameras. I didn't want you to think it was anything creepy. It was never supposed to be that." "It was a little creepy," I said honestly. "Sweet, but creepy." "Understood, equally both." He held out the umbrella that had been waiting against the wall, then, after a beat, folded down his own instead and offered me his arm to walk under it, which struck me as either old-fashioned or clumsy, and possibly both of those too. "Can I walk you to your car?" As myself this time, no more anonymous weather assistance. I said yes, mostly because the alternative was standing in the rain overthinking it. And overthinking things is a habit I've been trying to break since residency taught it to me in the first place. We didn't fall into anything simple after that. I want to be honest about that part, because the story people like to tell themselves is that the umbrella moment fixes everything. Cues the music, rolls the credits. It didn't. We had an awkward first coffee where he over-explained cardiac output to a respiratory therapist who did not need it explained. I had a night where I snapped at him over nothing because a patient had coded on my shift and I was raw and looking for somewhere to put it. We argued once about whether it was appropriate to date someone whose orders occasionally overlapped with my documentation, and agreed, eventually, that as long as neither of us was the other's supervisor and nothing about our clinical judgment bent around the relationship, we'd figure the rest out as adults. What I keep coming back to, months later, walking to my car on a dry night for once, is that 6 weeks of silent umbrellas taught me more about patience than any of the direct approaches I'd gotten from other people over the years. Every single delivery was a decision to keep caring without asking for anything back. That's either the most romantic thing anyone's done for me, or a case study in someone avoiding a conversation he was scared to have. I've turned it over so many times, I've stopped expecting to land cleanly on one side. Daniel still leaves an umbrella sometimes, even now, even though he has my number, even though he could just text and ask if I need a ride. "Old habit," he says. I think it's something else. I think some gestures matter more once you know exactly who's behind them, and some part of both of us likes keeping the ritual instead of replacing it with something more convenient. The teal one's still in my closet. I never did give it back to Lost and Found.